everybody out. Like if I could blink the lights in, like a computer. Okay, see we have a whole lot of back row worshipers. I like that. Audio for the video it's going to play. We're going to test that. Okay, so try the video, try the welcome video. See if we can hear it.
I want to tip.
There we go. Okay, we had to do a little tech testing there because we have a couple of video messages for you. First of all, in case you don't know who I am, I'm Carrie O'Rourke, and I'm from Grace and Holy Trinity Cathedral, and I'm the chairperson of the Interfaith Ecumenical Committee and the Social Justice Committee. And this exhibit fits exactly into that paradigm, where we're trying to just kind of raise awareness of what's happening in one part of the world, but we're also trying to come up with an action, which at the end I'm going to invite you to do some things. Most people, I would say, probably don't know what's happening in Turkey, and so that's what we're going to work on tonight. So, my tech guy, Ahmet, let's start the PowerPoint. I worked really hard on this PowerPoint, so we're going to... Almost there. So the title of this presentation, or the title of this exhibit, I named it Unmuted. The host group, of course, is Advocates of Silenced Turkey. And there's no more greater silencing of a voice than when somebody is deceased. You know, when somebody dies, they can't speak anymore, right? Or when somebody has been so oppressed or so, long in solitary confinement, their voice is gone. But one thing that's true about voice is oftentimes the voice is there, we just can't hear it. We don't have the ears to hear it. And so tonight I'm going to invite you to listen with the ear of your heart and incline your ear toward your heart, which is a Benedictine concept, but it's also a true concept. You can't walk through this exhibit without your heart having an experience here. I mean, that's just the truth, right? This is not a woohoo fun kind of event. This is a serious event. So again, the title is Unmuted, and that means we are no longer going to be silent for our friends and family of people who are grieving and who have lost so much. Our sponsoring group is Advocates of Silenced Turkey. Okay, but before we get to there, I want to talk to you about the bridge. This is a thing, this is a logo I designed. I have been teaching an English language learner class for about 1.5 years. And thank you, Mehmet, for getting me involved in that. He invited me to start that, and it was supposed to be just a few weeks, and now it's been 1.5 years, almost 2 years. We meet every weekend, Saturday and Sunday morning, okay? And what's unique about this group is it's all people from Turkey. And it's all asylees or refugees, and people who are still in Turkey who have been arrested or detained or are hiding, trying to get away, they're trying to figure it out. It's a very private group. It's kind of a dangerous group, because if they were living in Turkey and they were found out to be a member of this group, that alone could send them to prison for 7 years. So it's kind of this thing. So it's mostly men, although we have a couple of women, a young girl and Merve sometimes joins us, but mostly it's men. And it's so important for them to tell their story. And so to tell their story, I help them learn English language to be able to writing. And so we use metaphor. And so our metaphor is this bridge. Because what we live in, the place where we all live, here in the United States especially, is called my comfort zone. We live in a comfortable place. We don't worry about as many things as others do. We have a lot of privileges that other people don't have, right? So we live in our comfort zone. And we don't often have the opportunity to sit in a room like this with Christians, with Muslims, with agnostics, with Jewish people, with whoever's here. We don't have an opportunity all that often to mix, right? So Dialogue Institute of Kansas City does these things called bridging dinners. That's where our Muslim brothers and sisters invite us to their house, and we have dinner with them, and we get to know them. And for many of us, it's the first time we've ever done that. So it's really special. And so when we cross this bridge, we go to a place called Todos son bienvenidos, which in Spanish means all are welcome. And I picked it in a completely different language than Turkish or English on purpose, because it takes us to this exotic place that we may not understand and we have to learn about, right? And so the name of our bridge is called Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, or DEI, which in Latin means, anybody know? Ed knows. Anybody, Andy, you probably know. DEI means God in Latin. And the God who created all of us is one God, right? We believe we're monotheists. We believe in one God that created all of what we have here, both our Muslim brothers and sisters, our Christian brothers and sisters, and all others in between, right? Everybody created by that same God. So God is the quintessential, perfect example of diversity, equity, and complete inclusion where all are welcome. So that's the name of our book that we've been writing for a year and a half. Watch for it to come out on shelves. Not soon. It's a slow process. But anyway, so I wanted to introduce that concept to you. If you are sitting next to someone you know, I invite you to get up and walk around and sit next to somebody you don't know. Say hello to them. Everybody was supposed to get a name tag. Get to know somebody you've never met before and have this inclusive experience, because tonight is a free-for-all in that arena, okay? So I invite you to do that. Okay, so I always like to begin, and every time we have worked on this exhibit, I have tried to begin, sometimes it comes at the end, but I've tried to make sure we pray. Because the number one way we unsilence a voice is through meeting and getting to know our God better, right? And so I want to start with a prayer, and I tried to make it as inclusive as possible. You can add anything you want to this, please, okay? So, again, I don't speak Hebrew, but I think that word is emunah, and it means this faith that is an innate conviction, a perception of truth that transcends rather than evades reason. So it transcends any organized religion. It's that gut feeling of faith that we have inside us. Okay? So loving God, who created all living things and humanity in perfect vision, thank you for this amazing moment in time. Enrich our lives by widening our circles of inclusion and your presence in all of our differences. Give us the gift of love and increase our ability to appreciate the value and dignity of all life until our hearts are made perfect. Tonight we remember all the victims of violence in our community, in our country, in Turkey, and in the world. Tonight we remember all victims of violence, and we ask your blessing on all who grieve. And we ask this in the name of a God that is too big to put one single name on. Allah, Jesus, Creator, God, Jehovah, Yahweh, whatever name you give to God, that power in your life that gives you this faith, emunah, be it upon us tonight. And we all say, Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Okay, I'm about to stop talking in a minute. I'm going to invite somebody else in. Advocates of Silence Turkey is a 501c3 organization. It's based in New Jersey, and we have a couple of special guests from New Jersey right here with us. Stand up. Aslihan. This is Aslihan. She's beautiful. And Numeira. She too is beautiful. They flew from New Jersey, but before they did that, they loaded all this stuff up in a giant truck on pallets. I'm sorry for their husbands because they emptied their pocketbooks because it costs a lot to get all this stuff here, and bought tickets. Thank you so much for coming and honoring us. So appreciate that, yes. So they're from New Jersey. They're part of the organization. They're volunteers with the organization. The mission and goals, I just gave you the main one here, is to address all forms of human rights violations perpetrated in Turkey. Okay, they focus on Turkey. We know that human rights violations happen all around the world, but let me also tell you one thing. In Turkey right now, countries aligned with the Erdogan regime will extradite people from other countries back to Turkey to put them in prison. Or they will refuse to renew their passports so they can't go to another country. We have some people here who are here in the United States as a result of that, right? Yeah, several, okay. So there's a lot of long arms, like a big giant octopus that's like a octave times 100 puss, you know, it's like got lots of tentacles, okay? All right. So what are human rights? Human rights are rights inherent to all human beings. By the way, I hate it when people read PowerPoints to me, so I'm sorry that I'm doing that for you. But I don't want to mess that up. I didn't want to mess up the definition. But what are human rights? Human rights, we in this country expect things. We have a right to clean water. We have a right to electricity. We have a right to the life, liberty, and happiness, right? We try to do that all the time. And we fight for those rights. And we're quite proud of fighting for those rights. Okay? So, for some people, especially these people in Turkey, they don't have those rights anymore. Those rights have been taken away. They've been stripped away. So imagine what it would be like if that happened to us right here. If all of a sudden you lost everything merely because of your faith statement. You know, I'm Episcopalian. Whoop, you're going to jail. Okay? You know, am I willing to do that? Am I willing to risk that? Think about it. That's what's happened. Okay, so it's very serious. Any questions or comments before we move on? Now I'm going to invite, now comes the invitation. It's almost like an altar call for my Christian friends here. Okay? What is a human rights advocate? Well, just by your very presence here tonight, you are advocating for human rights. You are saying, I want to learn more about this. I want to find out what's happening, right? Your presence here, because if you didn't like the topic, you'd probably just leave, right? You can vote with your feet. But as an advocate, that means we're moved to action. And so we'll probably have some action items a little later, I predicted. Okay? But just being aware of what's happening and say, what can I do? And I can tell you one thing you can do right now. Again, turn to your friend that you've never met before and say, bienvenidos, which in Spanish means welcome. Glad you're here. Okay? Because welcoming is a verb. That's right. I want everybody to do that right now. Just stand up or do something. Do the sign of peace. Say hello to your neighbor.
I guess. Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming all the way.
And so now I have a little trick that I'm going to play on you. Did everybody enjoy some baklava and tea? Does everybody had a chance to get to the baklava and tea? The baklava is amazing, isn't it? Sir Peel made some, or was that, did you make it, or did, no, Mervyn, where's Mervyn? Mervyn made it. Yeah, Mervyn made it. Yeah. So, here's the thing. There's a Turkish proverb that says, once we share this cup of tea or this cup of coffee, we no longer call each other stranger. We are now united for 40 years. So I hope you chose your friends wisely. Because 40 years is a lifetime, right? And once we know somebody, we have to be their advocate. You know? We can't call each other stranger anymore, right? There we go. Okay, so now I don't get to talk anymore. Ed, please come up and explain this to us.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I never knew that phrase until the first time I went to Turkey in 2006. And I saw it on buses, I saw it on taxi cabs, and I saw it in shops, windows, and all over the place. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most wonderful. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I went to Turkey for the first time in 2006, and I knew nothing about Turkey. Nothing at all. And I read a little bit about it. I knew a little about Suleiman, and I knew a little bit about Hagia Sophia, but that was about it. That was about it. And we were a group of pastors from Kansas City, and we met folks. Folks met us at the airport. First night we took one of the ferries or one of the boats out onto the Bosphorus and Sea of Marmara for a wonderful dinner. And that was the first occasion. It was the food kind of thing that you were talking about here. And that kept happening. That happened in restaurants. That happened in people's homes. That happened casually when we had cups of tea. And I had to learn that Turkish tea was very different than American tea. And kept happening, kept happening, kept happening. We kept getting welcome. And we kept getting presents. I'm from a culture that when you go to somebody's house, you're supposed to take a present to that person. And, you know, some food or something. And we go to people's houses, and they give us gifts. And I just kept wondering in my head, what is going on here? Why is this happening in this kind of way? So about the middle of the trip, in a hotel in Nevşehir, a hotel in Nevşehir, the fellow that was leading our group, some of you may know him, Mohammed Chetin, was leading our group. And after we had dinner and people were kind of going to the rooms and so forth, he was staying there in the lobby and talking to somebody. And I, sat down and was kind of listening, and finally that other person left, which I was glad. And I started asking, what's all this about? What's all this about? What's all this about? Are you trying to propagandize us in some way? Are you trying to kind of pull us toward Islam in some way? He explained. It was about the grace of God. It was about sharing. It was about hospitality. It was about family. And that whole thing, we spent 6 hours there, talked till 2 or 3 in the morning, and felt such a bond with him. And that was kind of my introduction to two things. It was my introduction to Hizmet, but it was also my introduction to that deep, deep well of hospitality and beauty in the Turkish culture and in the Muslim culture. It really was a opening up for me. Grew up as an ordinary middle-class white kid in America. And so it was kind of a new world, a whole new world for me. And one of the things that we talked about that evening was, where did all this movement come from? I expected it to be some institutionalized organization. He made very clear to me right away, it was a movement. It wasn't an institution. It was a movement, and a movement, as I understand, to the degree that I understand what he said. In the 1980s, there was a great deal of conflict, great deal of violence in Turkey, much of it on college and university campuses, where basically very conservative students, both conservative religiously and politically, and very liberal and sometimes non-religious students, were clashing physically almost all the time over the political issues of the day. Some of those issues remain the same, but the main thing that he told me about is that clash. In the middle of that, there was this imam, Hocaefendi, Fethullah Gulen, who emerged and started saying, mainly to the students, stop, literally stop killing one another. Stop killing one another, get an education, start a family, start some job or some profession in a community, and say your prayers. I'll get back to that part in just a minute. And so out of his preaching, the weeping imam, out of his preaching came this movement, and it expressed itself in Mehmet, what you were talking about, the young guys coming from the countryside and kind of being lost in the big city. And the movement kind of gathered them together for houses, and kind of what we in America might recognize as they had house mothers and people who helped provide home cooking for those young men, and provided a stability and a place where they're in a very foreign situation. They could sense that home and that love and that care. And then moved on to things like, oh, maybe we ought to start a kindergarten or a daycare center somewhere. And maybe we'll get some volunteers to help with that. And maybe we'll get some of these businessmen who are just starting to emerge in the economy. Maybe we'll get some of them to provide some money for some books. And then the kindergartens became grade schools, and grade schools became high schools, and high schools became universities. And then started looking at, oh, well, you know, we've got people with a lot of health problems. Maybe we ought to start a clinic. And maybe we ought to recruit some doctors to help us and all that kind of thing. And so I visited 2 different hospitals. This is back before the supposed coup. 2 different hospitals, one in Istanbul. I had knee problems, Gary, and they offered to work on my knee at that point in time. And visited also a hospital in Izmir. And so you started seeing, and I, you know, as an American, as somebody who's fairly paranoid, I kept saying, wondering, where's the institution? Where's the legalized organization that's doing that? And I kept seeing it was all these people who were gathering as a movement, trying to make a change in a culture that was kind of caught between the West and the East, and was kind of struggling with where it might go. A lot of that's been lost. The hospitals have been lost, the schools have been lost, the universities have been lost, the newspaper's been lost. One of the most wonderful places I visited was an organization called Kimse Yok Mu. Kimse Yok Mu, as I understand, I know no Turkish except 2 or 3 phrases. Kimse Yok Mu means, is anybody there? And that organization, the movement coalesced, and I can't remember the year, some of you probably can tell me, but back in the 1980s or 1990s, there was a horrible earthquake in northern Turkey. And they're totally, the government was totally unprepared to deal with the level of destruction and the needs and the pains. And one of the things that these volunteers from the HISMET organization went to the sites of the earthquake, and one of the things they did was undo the rubble, and one of the things they kept saying and kept hearing, Kim Seok, is anybody there? Is anybody there? That organization developed to where they were the first people from outside world that got to Haiti during the big, huge earthquake that happened in Haiti some years ago. So this is an organization that did wonderful social service, and particularly emergency assistance in all kinds of catastrophes all around the world. It's gone. It's gone. So many of these wonderful things that I saw are gone. And I haven't heard, the Turkish friends that I've maintained are here in this country, so I don't know. But I assume some of those people that I met are some of these people that got arrested and imprisoned and so forth. And so a lot of that's gone. So the question arises for me, what's left? If all that's gone, what's left? You are left. We are left. We are what's left. And the movement didn't start with lots of money and lots of organization and lots of institutions. It started with some people who heard a voice that says, build something, build a community, build services, build education, build up individual people who are hurting and who need some guidance and help. That's still left. That's left in Turkey in a very, very oppressed kind of way, but it's left here with various kinds of, with AO and all the other volunteers around here. It's left as those people hear something of what's possible in terms of human community. And so every time in my review of history, mostly European, mostly Christian, but every time there's been a real renewal of spiritual realities within the culture, it's happened with something small. I think one of the most marvelous examples of that in America, why is there a black African-American Christian church? I can't think of any real reason there ought to be, except that somebody along the way heard a message of something other than enslavement and said, we are people. We have a history. We have a tradition. And it started small, infinitely small, and grew into this wonderful presence in the United States culture. And it's happened down through history numerous times as people have said, we know what's going on in the big culture, and it's not right, and we're going to do something different. We're going to do something different. And finally, instead of get back to the prayers, I want to read you something that was written a long time ago to a Turkish church. The church was in Efes, south of Izmir. And one of our early Christian leaders wrote to that congregation that was having a hard time. They were oppressed and they were being abused and so forth. And this leader, we call him the Apostle Paul. For it is not against human enemies that we have to struggle, but against the principalities and the ruling forces who are masters of the darkness in this world, the spirits of evil in the heavens. We're not talking simply about a political or sociological fight. talking about a spiritual fight with those who are so preoccupied with themselves that they become forces of evil. We're talking about the spiritual fight. One of the other things that impressed me most when I went to Turkey the first time, and I don't know what I expected, but I remember particularly stopping in Antalya and down on the south coast. And, we tourists got off the bus and went running for all the souvenir shops. And the guy who invited me on the trip, Fatih Özcan. Fatih is a chaplain, Muslim chaplain in a hospital in Houston. But everybody was spreading to the souvenir shops, and Fatih was going to a little mosque for prayer. I said, "Can I go with you?" "Yeah, sure." And so I went with him and watched, and I hope I wasn't too voyeuristic, but he prayed. He just did his prayers. Nothing too unusual for people who are Muslims. But I was a pastor for 40 years. And I know that any congregation I served, unless there were people praying, there was no congregation. There was no reality there. And so I recognized what he was doing as the same kind of thing that I saw happen on the positive side of things in churches. So we're still here. We're still Hizmet. We're still the movement. We're still trying to do whatever we can do to help people understand what's happening in Turkey and what's happening in other places. And we do the best work we can. If we contact as many of our friends as we can to help them get this message. If we really learn to know something about a history that's other than just our own Western European history, if we can understand a culture that is based on hospitality and love, if we can immerse ourselves in that, then the movement's not over. It's not over. Terrible things have happened. The numbers you see over on those things over there, they're probably underestimates. There are probably many, many, many more people than that are. But we're still here. And we still have the possibility of doing what Hoja Effendi asked the students to do back in the 1980s. We can do it. So, thank you. Appreciate your.
Wow, thank you, Ed. That was awesome. That was great information. Okay, so now I have a special treat for you. I told you about that class that I teach. I asked one of my students who, you'll see he had a little bit of difficulty with his English. I asked him to just talk about what this meant to him. And so he provided us with a welcome message. So, okay.
I want to thank you for coming to this very important event. I think this is so important because people need to know that someone cares what's happening in Turkey right now. I am a refugee in Germany at this time. Then I was a postgraduate student in Turkey, and I was in a Turkish prison for 10 months. I was arrested and sent to the prison because I'm a Hizmet. And then after the prison, I need to flee from my country. I feel very blessed to have survived. And right now, I am starting my new life in Germany. So really, I am really appreciate to people who is in this situation. So I am so thankful to listen to us, to give support our voice. Thank you very much.
That is a young man that I often call a son when I speak with him on Saturday and Sunday morning. He's now in his very early 30s. He was in prison, and his comment to me that touched me, I've interviewed him several times, and by the way, it took us about 8 or 9 tries to get that message. But he was really important for him to do it. One of the things he said, he goes, when they arrested me and they took me to jail, I thought only bad people went to jail. Only bad people go to prison. Why are they taking me? I'm just a college student, He was a master's degree, software engineer, brilliant young man. And they took him to prison, and when he got there, they had arrested so many Hizmet people that he was in a cell that was designed for 7 men. There were 40 of them in there. And they were all his men. And he said something that is so out of it blows my mind in American culture. He said, if it weren't for those guys, I never would have survived, those other men. Because we all shared the same thing and we helped each other, we cooperated, we worked together. So unlike American prisons, we all see the propaganda in American prisons. When you go to prison in America, man, you better be ready to fight, right? No, they were ready to love and care for one another, to get each other through. And an example of that, another example of that, Terry and I both have a piece of jewelry. I don't know if you can see it, but this piece of jewelry, thank you, Shmeira and Errol. She has one very similar to this. Shmeira's mother went to prison. How many people in this room can say, my mother went to prison? Okay. I think my mother might have spent a night in jail one night. I don't know. I'm not sure. She was kind of wild. But most of us don't have mothers who went to prison, right? And her mother is a very good woman. I have talked to her through a translator, through Shmeira, many times. And so her mother went to prison because she was a teacher, right? Am I right? She was a teacher or businesswoman? Yeah, business. Okay. And she was in jail with another woman who was a very brilliant woman, like a PhD person, right? And this woman, I guess maybe she got bored while she was in prison, I don't know. She taught herself how to make jewelry. And she made these necklaces. And she sells them on Etsy now. Because when people get out of the prison, they can't earn a living. They can't get a job. No one will hire them. No one will take them back in because they're like, got a big black X on their whole thing, their whole life. They can't get a job. They've had all their assets taken away. They've had everything taken from them. And so this woman taught herself to make jewelry and made this jewelry for us. And this is a very precious gift. Thank you, Samira and Errol. But I just, again, every time I wear it or I have it, I'm praying for that woman to have success. And she's passing that on to other women in prison. Isn't that amazing? Okay. So now I want to share one more video with you. This is Mr. Murat. He's the president of AST. Welcome. That's me. Go ahead.
I'm so happy to have you here tonight with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much, Kai, for giving me this opportunity. My name is Murat. I'm the president of Ethics of Science Turkey, and it is great to see you, to hear you once more after you came to New Jersey a couple months ago, Kai.
Yeah, that was a powerful event, and now we have brought this event from New Jersey to Kansas City and elsewhere, and I just think it's so meaningful and so important for us to share this information with everybody, because unless people know what's happening, how can we do anything to stop it or to make it different? So what is it about AST that is special to you? Why should why should we be interested in what's happening in Turkey?
The thing is, as you know, especially after 2016, there was a huge persecution of innocent people in Turkey. More than 100,000 people jailed. And since 2016, more than 859 people died under persecution, torture, or while fleeing Turkey. And we believe that as a human, to be a voice of these voiceless people is very important, not just in Turkey, but as a part of global society. For that reason, as a human being, I believe that it is not possible for those people to raise their voice under an authoritarian regime in Turkey, but we are free in this great country, and we are able to raise their voice by using the blessings given by God to us. For that reason, I think it's very important, Karin.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I titled the presentation Unmuted because
Yeah.
they have been muted. These people that are, part of our exhibit, the actual people have been muted by death, and been silenced by death. But their families have not been silenced. Their grief is not silent. And every time we say their name out loud, every time we bring this forward, they are not forgotten. And it is a way it's a means of unsilencing their voice. And I think it's just so important for them to be heard. And I think it's essential that the voice not go silent.
You are totally true, Kari. Especially your title, Unmuted, is a great example. When you said unmuted, you remember me, Ayşe Paraldak, who was another innocent political prisoners and journalist in Turkey. As you know, Turkey, unfortunately, right now is one of the worst country for jailing the journalists in the world too. And one of the things which she said is that she said that I am afraid to be forgotten in this prison.
Right.
And for that reason, you said not to be forgotten is very important for those people.
I agree. And that unforgetting, the unforgetting part is unmuting their voice and letting it be heard what their story is. So I thank you very much for supporting this. I know it was not cheap. It was not inexpensive to make all of this happen. There was a lot of human labor that has gone into it. There's a lot of logistics that have gone into it. It's cost some money, and it's hard to do. It costs our heart something every time we have to look at each one of these stories. And I think that's the powerful part of this message, is that we unsilence people through that message. We listen to their story, because each story is unique and each story has its own beauty. And I just want you to know, I pray for those families who are grieving the loss. I also pray for the people who are trying to recover from the trauma that has happened.
Right.
So I thank you very much for inviting me into this organization and allowing me this opportunity. Thank you so much.
No. Especially, we are very thankful from the bottom of our heart to you, to all the organizers, especially to you, to Kelly, to Terry, to Edward, to Jude, to Fatima and Taylor and the youth for bringing such a great event to Kansas City and organizing this at the Gross Holy Trinity Church in the United Methodist Church and the University of St. Mary. Thank you so much. You became the voice of these voiceless people.
Well, thank you, and we will be talking to you again soon, I hope.
Thank you so much, Guy. Thank you.
So that's Mr. Murat, and I met him in June, as you know, as you heard. So he's the president of Advocates of Silence Turkey. He's a humble man. He's a very humble man. And he is so grateful for each person here. And that's the message that he wants everyone here to know, is he is so grateful that you are here tonight. And so who are the victims? Who are we talking about here? These victims are family members. These victims are husbands, their wives, their mothers, their fathers. You know, by the way, did you know when a small woman goes to prison, or when a woman with a small child goes to prison, she takes that small child with her? When a woman who's pregnant goes to prison, she has that baby in prison. In fact, one of the exhibits over there, there's a little boy, a 3-year-old boy, who has never seen the outside world. He's growing up in prison. How about that? The first 3 years of life, that's when your baby is so precious and you're teaching it how to talk and how to walk and how to do everything. That baby's learning how to do that in prison. How tough is that, right? So those are the victims. Victims like you and me. Moms, dads, brothers, sisters, people, neighbors. That's what that is. So this is important. We must now be their voice. We must unmute them. We must remember these people, say their names out loud, even if you can't pronounce it, say it anyway. Okay? Doesn't matter. God knows. And so, the invitation tonight, you can do whatever you can think of. You can buy books. We have lots of books, and if you can't be moved by some of those books, wow. Get the book, Stories of Hope. Let me. You can't sit and read this without your heart being moved. I 100% guarantee you. These stories are very simple stories, and the children wrote them. And then somebody translated them. So one of the stories in there goes, my mom and dad took me to my grandma's house, and my aunt came over and brought my cousin. We played all day, and we were really tired, and we went to bed. And when we woke up the next morning, Mom and Dad were gone, and my baby brother was gone. And my grandma and aunt told me, oh, they had to take your brother to the hospital, to the doctor. And then when they didn't come back, they said, oh, they had to go to another town. And then when they took the little guy to see his parents at the prison, they said, oh, your parents are working at the prison now. So here's this little guy, 9 years old at the time. The adults in his life can't tell him the truth. They can't. It's too hard for them to tell. And he can't understand what's happening and why his parents aren't coming home. That's one of the stories in this book, page 94. I pray for that little kid every day, because that's trauma that kid's never going to get over, right? Okay? There's a whole bunch of those stories in this book. We ask for a $13 donation, but if you don't have it, just take the book. You can make it up to us later, okay? This book is about the first man who died in prison shortly after. People are dying in prison because they're not getting health care, because they're being mistreated, because they're being tortured. If you want to see the pictures, there's some pictures over there. Don't look at them if you have a weak stomach. I'm serious, because they're real. People are beaten. Women are raped. It's not a positive thing. It's not a good thing. In this book, I met the author of this book, Mina. She is a beautiful woman. She also is authoring another book about this exhibit. So, Silent Scream is probably my favorite book. I mean, Stories of Hope, it's my favorite, but it's the hardest to read. Silent Screams, second hardest to read. We have extra copies of these two. You have to order this one on Amazon. All the books are available on Amazon, okay? So if you want to know more. But what I invite you to do tonight Ayub is over there by the black book. What does this exhibit mean to you? What has it meant to you to come here tonight to do this? What does it mean to you? And what message do you want to pass along? Write it in the book, please. And the second thing I want to invite you to do is we have a way, a top secret way, of smuggling letters into the prison to give hope to people who are there. If you would like to write a letter to someone that you've never met to give them hope, write your letter, get it to me, I will get it translated, and we will work to get it into the prison to someone. You can write it to a mother, you can write it to a young college student, woman or man, you can write it to a father, you can write it to a grandmother or grandfather. There's an 82-year-old man with cancer, late-stage cancer, in prison now. They won't let him out. He's over there. Write those letters and make it part of your prayer. Like, don't just go, hey, how you doing? Sit down and pray about it and write a heartfelt letter to somebody. And I will work hard to get it to somebody who cares, who wants to hear it, who needs to hear it. So unmute yourself and write just a little bit. You need help with the writing, we'll help you over there, okay? Any questions or comments? Any dialogue you want to have?
Carrie, I'm not quite clear on who they're arresting.
Okay. Well, we don't want this to be a political discussion. Okay, I want this to be prayerful, but it is a political situation. The Hizmet people are people who follow Fethullah Gulen, excuse me if I mispronounced it. He's a man, he's an imam who, Ed was talking about this group of people. By the way, I only know about 3 Turkish words, and one of them is Hizmet. Hizmet means service. And I think of the Hizmet people kind of like the Catholic workers, because I'm a Catholic worker, right? Catholic workers believe in service. We serve others. We feed you. Okay? Some of the nuns, when I was part of that group, we give you health care. We educate you. That's what the Hizmet people do. They take their faith and put it into action. And that action is service. And that is the best way I can describe it. The political regime, the Erdogan regime, sees that as a political threat because they're trying to employ Islamic law, which is very conservative. For example, Hizmet women believe, Hizmet families, the women are fully educated. Not just in cooking and cleaning. And in extreme Islamic law sometimes, although, I don't know. Sir Peel's laughing. In extreme Islamic law, you've seen what's happening in Afghanistan, right? The women, they can't go past 6th grade, and then they're only educated in sewing, cooking, being good housewives, raising children, right? Well, there are people in this room with PhDs in chemistry. Well, where's Uma's not here tonight, but PhDs in education. Those women are here tonight with you. Very intelligent. In fact, they intimidate me a lot. It's a different kind of culture, okay? So the Erdogan regime sees that as a threat. And so much so that as a political maneuver, there was a staged coup in 2016, July 15, 2016. And at that time, they blamed the Hizmet people for this coup. But the Hizmet people don't believe in violence. They won't even kill. If there's a bug on the floor, they're not going to stomp on it. They're going to pick it up with a piece of paper and chuck it out the door. Okay, they don't believe in violence. So it's perpendicular to what they believe. So there's a staged coup, and at that time, that's when they imprisoned the most people. But they are still imprisoning people. And they're not letting people out. And people are dying. And people who are trying to flee are dying crossing the Merch River or the Aegean Sea, trying to go to Greece, through Greece to someplace else, or through... One of my friends, Aslan's husband, as a matter of fact, said, oh, northern Iran to get there, to get out. And that was more dangerous than crossing the river where people die every day, okay? So it's very dangerous. Lots of people die. There's one family over there, a husband, a wife, and 3 kids. They're in a boat trying to cross the river in the middle of the night. Something happens with the boat capsizes. Mom and 3 children die. They drown. And leave dad wondering, what should I have done different? You know, I mean, think about all the questions that go along with that, right? Wow. So that's the people who are being persecuted. And they're being persecuted for living their faith, for following what they believe. And I'm very passionate about what I believe, and I think everybody in this room is. And I would prefer not to be persecuted for that, you know? But I'm going to fight like heck for those who are being persecuted to make that try to go away. Any other comments or questions? Good question. Thank you. We have a few thank yous. I mean, we have a lot of thank yous. So, did you want to do that now, Aslan? Your thank yous? No? Okay, she doesn't want to do it now. Okay, so we would invite you to mingle, have some more baklava and tea. Hey, Yup wants to do something.
Yeah, we have some.
Oh, okay. I thought you did. Awesome. Look, she said she didn't want to. Aslan is very shy, just so you know. But she is a force to be reckoned with. I don't know. Come over here to the microphone so people can. Where is it?
Hello everybody. It is a great evening to be with you. Please know that this event will influence thousands of people who are being persecuted by their own countrymen. So this is not just a Kansas City local event. It will have a ripple effect, as they say. And actually, Aslan came from New Jersey, and we were having a conversation just last week. She said she has 6 more items to bring. The artifacts belonging to either deceased people or politically arbitrarily detained people. And I said, we already actually have enough, 42, so you don't need to really bring. But her response was, but their families will be so happy to see that their spouses' artifacts or sons or kids' artifacts will be exhibited in a place in Kansas City, in the United States. So that really touched me and definitely touched more deeper to their family. So your presence really mattered. And yeah. So we want to recognize a few people here who tirelessly work with us. We have a local, well, I would kind of say local, but it became now national advisory board group for advocates of silence Turkey. That group is really unique. It's the only one in the US and have mainly Americans caring about Turkish people. But I'm sure actually they don't really just care about Hizmet Turkish people, they care about everyone. So, and one of them is Reverend Ed Stevenson, and Aslan will present this to Ed, please, Ed. Young one, that's the young one.
That's my young picture.
Wait, that's right.
Thank you.
Can we take a photo?
Thank you. Thank you.
It was downloaded on Facebook. And the next one is Terry Handley. She's, I guess, one of the most popular activists in Kansas. She was one of the first people that, like, my to-go person in terms of activism, and she's behind the Women's Days protests we had twice in Kansas City the last 2 years. And this was actually in other states organized these International Women's Days protests. And then, but as a Kansas City group, we were not, or I was not really daring to kind of take that initiative. But when this kind of topic brought to the meeting, Anne said she has organized hundreds of protests. And she can take the responsibility. So that was why it was a great event, because I wasn't leading, she was leading. Thank you. And this is hers.
My pleasure.
I guess people can still walk around the exhibit,
I have one more thing to do.
or Jerry is the boss. Thank you.
Ooh, you heard that, right? We got that on camera, right? I don't have to be the boss. I just want to tell you about these pictures here, and then you can go. Terry and I were in New Jersey for the exhibit in New Jersey, in Merivale, and they had a silent auction. Well, no, it wasn't a silent auction, it was a live auction. And people were bidding these crazy amounts on these paintings. These paintings are in a book over there. They're taken from a book, something art. One of the books over there. This one is mine. This is people crossing the Merritt River. And then this is the freedom. The freedom that death brings is the spirits going to heaven. And then in the shadow box is this person did not pass away. She got out of prison and she offered these things. These are the things she had with her in prison. And so we just have these on display here too, just to share with you how powerful it is. And again, it's in the book if you want to read the book about it. But this is an unbelievable gift to us. Okay. Again, thank you so much for coming. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. From the people from our people and our families, thank you so much. Please enjoy baklava and tea and conversation. Get to know someone. If you see somebody here you haven't met, go